Welcome, all you ghosts and ghoulies, to... okay. Welcome all you ghosts and ghoulies to Conjuring Canvases, the show where spooky art is created and terrifying tales are told. My name is Lern the Conjurer, and I am your host. This series was inspired by Robert Welsh's Ghost Stories and Makeup Mondays. I recommend you checking out his channel for not only awesome makeup techniques, but some great spooky times. So if you'd like the link for that, it'll be in the description down below. Today's episode goes to a particular creature that I have been obsessed with since I was a wee little preteen. I may have wanted to be one, and I probably thought I was one. Don't judge. They're the creatures of the night that stalk you, prowl you, and then drink all of your blood dry. That is the vampire. So because we're covering vampires today, I decided to put on a vampire costume, and I did try to put in some fun fangs, but that's not gonna happen today. And naturally, the subject today is a vampire. Now, you might be wondering initially, this doesn't really look like a vampire, Lern. Well, I have a little bit of a backstory. Get ready to judge. So way back in the day, when I was 12, 13, I used to believe that I was a vampire. Solgoth, and you could not tell me twice. So you see, I used to imagine myself as a vampire once I got older, to about my age now. So I decided it might be fun to paint what I thought I was going to be as a vampire, which this is far nicer and far more graceful than myself, so indulge me, why don't you? Before we begin the episode, I want to give a shout out to everyone who has been watching and everyone who has been giving us awesome feedback about how the show has been going. I've been taking it very seriously and have been trying to emulate whatever I could to make the show better for you. So I hope that you continue to keep those comments coming. So please remember to subscribe, also to like the video, and make sure that you go ahead and leave us a comment to tell us what you think of the show so far. So though this has nothing to do with feedback, I wanted to introduce to you all a special guest that will be joining us in a few episodes, starting today. Let me introduce you to Zed, the ghoul friend. Everyone say, "Hi, Zed." "Hi, everybody. I'm just really happy to be here." "Oh, Zed, I know that you're just saying that just for funsies." "No, genuinely, I had no idea that you even had candy here." "Zed, yeah, I do have candy, but I didn't have it out." Did you steal my candy?" Zed, you smell like chocolate and wafers." "That's just how I always smell. Don't you know that ghouls always smell like chocolate and wafers?" "Well, okay, Zed. Well, I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy that you're hanging out with us today. Are you excited to be here?" "Always excited to dig myself out of the grave and watch some spooky art with you, Lern." "Oh, Zed." You know how to make a host blush, that's for sure. "Can you put me back in the candy basket now?" "Well, sure, of course, but you promise to say goodbye to everyone, right, at the end of the episode?" "Of course, but before I leave, I want to let everyone know that I've been answering all the emails. So make sure that if you have a spooky story that has to do with me, a ghoul, or anything that's creepy, email us at conjuringcanvases@gmail.com. Thank you, Zed. You're the perfect office administrator. I try. All right, everyone say bye, Zed. Of course, before we begin, there has to be a disclaimer, ghosts and ghoulies. I am not an expert in art, nor am I an expert in anything that I'm talking about. I really am just doing this all for fun, and I have a feeling that you like the spooky and creepy too. So, I hope you enjoy what we bring together today in today's episode. For each episode, I like to give a spooky, special shout out to a really awesome creepy thing that I think you'll enjoy. And today's spooky shout out goes to Snap Judgement presents Spooked. It is probably some of the creepiest content that I have ever heard with my two earballs. So I highly recommend that you checking them out. The host is amazing. His name is Glenn Washington, and he tells some great spooky tales, along with some real, allegedly true stories that are narrated by the people who experience them. So I highly recommend you checking it out. All right, everyone, I think it's time to get painting. I got the paints all laid out. So let's talk about the history and the origins of vampires. So let's start with, what is a vampire? Well, I'm sure many of you already know this answer, But a vampire is typically defined as someone who is a night-stalking monster who feeds on the blood of the living. Oftentimes, the blood of the living means a person. So really what we're trying to think of here is we're thinking of someone who is not human, who is often characterized as an immortal. Now, a vampire does have some weaknesses according to most folklore. The first one being the sun. Now, another thing is that there's a lot of common misconceptions about vampires that I think a lot of folklore has dreamt up as years have gone on. We've all heard of they can't be around garlic, for example. Either way, I don't think that that one necessarily stands the test of time. True believers of vampires don't really think that that's a real thing. There's also the superstition that they are afraid of crucifixes. So the whole thing that like they're creatures that work for the devil, so naturally they don't like crucifixes. You know, so of course, like, they're gonna hiss and scream and burst into flames when they look at one. A lot of people actually don't believe that. I, for one, really love Anne Rice's depiction of vampires, mostly because they're all beautiful. And once again, I wanted to be an Anne Rice vampire, because who didn't? And I remember in Interview with a Vampire, which is a phenomenal movie. I highly recommend you watch it. It's on most streaming services, and you may as well because it's spooky season, right? But Louis, in Interview with a Vampire, when he's being interviewed by the interviewer, he asks him if he doesn't like looking at crucifixes, and Louis says, well, actually, I really like looking at crucifixes. Now, going into more things that apparently vampires can't do, or like they have weaknesses, or they're strong, or whatever, there is also the belief that vampires can only reproduce by biting someone and feeding them their own blood. So they can't reproduce like us humans can. I'm adding a little bit of white in here because if you haven't already guessed, the big circle in the background here is actually going to be a moon. So I want it to be like the moon is illuminating the night sky. Just a couple more things before I go into the true origins of where vampires began. Vampires, because they do drink the blood of humans. One thing is that if they drink the blood of a dead human, it actually poisons them. So again, that's another thing that you see in Interview with a Vampire as well. They don't necessarily need to feed off of humans. They can feed off of anything that's living. It's just humans taste better to them, evidently. And they're apparently very sexy. Which, I mean, like, yeah, I guess they are. But most people say it's the reason why humans would consider vampires attractive is because they have a way of hypnotizing you. So, kind of like how some people believe that vampires can't come into your home unless you invite them. Like, you have to invite them in. And that's pretty common in most vampire lore. So, you can go to places like, if you're in America, you can go to New Orleans, which is one of the biggest vampire capitals of the world. And there are vampire tours there that can teach you a lot of vampire lore. I didn't get to do that when I was in New Orleans, but definitely when I go back, that is going to be a humongous goal of mine, for sure. Now, another thing is that they have the ability to read your thoughts. So they can speak to you through your mind as well as tell what you're thinking without you even saying it. There's plenty of people who say that they have vampire masters, but they are still human. So if you've ever watched the show What We Do in the Shadows, fantastic show, also fantastic movie. There's a character named Guillermo, and Guillermo hasn't been made a vampire, and all he wants to do is be made a vampire by his master, Nandor. And it's really funny. God, I love that show. Alright, so let's actually talk about the origins. A lot of people believe that the origin of the vampire came from Bram Stoker's novel, Dracula, who Bram Stoker actually published his novel in 1897. Now, a lot of people think that he was the one who thought of vampires and, like, that's where they all came from. But actually, it goes back far more than Bram Stoker's novel did. So where did the idea of Dracula come from? People speculate that Bram Stoker got inspiration from a very real count who was actually named Dracula. His real name, Vlad Dracula, also known as Vlad the Impaler. Vlad the Impaler lived in Romania and was a ruler there within the 14th century. And of course, he was known to be pretty cruel. He had many torture methods as well. He was known to fight for the Ottoman Empire, and the reason why he retrieved that nickname of Vlad the Impaler was because his favorite way of killing people in battle was to impale them. Classy. Pretty tough dude. Definitely somebody who I would be very intimidated by and scared of. So you're probably wondering, well, yeah, okay, so the guy, like, impaled people, sure, but that doesn't really make him something like a vampire. Well, this is just legend, but according to legend, Vlad the Impaler's favorite way of dining after he came from battle was he would actually eat his dinner amongst all of the dead. So literally he would sit there with his bread and his wine in front of all these dead people just chowing down. And it was said that he would take his bread and dip it into the blood of his killed victims. Nasty stuff. So, you know, vampire superstition, it really thrived in the Middle Ages because back then you had a lot of terrible things going on, like plagues. And, I mean, whole towns would be decimated by sickness. And oftentimes what would happen is if a new person rolled up into town, and, you know, people didn't really know anything about sickness back then, but if a new person rolled up into town and all these people randomly started dying off, they would immediately think that that person was a vampire. Now, very well, what if the person was actually like one of the first serial killers of the world? You know, hard to tell. But either way, people would hold on to that vampire suspicion because it was easier to accept that over all these people dying in mass graves because of a sickness. So, kind of sad when you think about it, but also people are going to cope in crazy ways, kind of like now. Now today, we have a legitimate disease that doctors have diagnosed as porphyria? Porphyries. I know it when I eat them. I think it's pronounced porphyria, but basically what it is it's a diagnosed condition where a person can't go out into the sun. It's a diagnosed condition where someone has a blood disorder, right? So, already keeping in the vampire theme. But this blood disorder makes it so that this person cannot go out into the sun. And if they do, they break out in these terrible blisters. So, just like in the same parallel as a vampire, they become sick when they go out in the sun. So there are actually a lot of researchers out there that think that porphyria existed back then in the Middle Ages, and these folks that would probably come into town would never come outside during the daytime but would only walk around at night, and so they were accused of vampirism. They probably suffered from this blood disorder, and, you know, can't really do anything about it now. Science, man. Seriously. But here's another really interesting thing about porphyria. It's actually recommended that one of the ways that you can alleviate some of your terrible symptoms is by ingesting blood. So, technically, I mean, if I'm looking at it from a realistic point of view, I think vampires do exist because they suffer from this legitimate blood disorder, and they have to drink blood in order for them to not feel sick. It would be just like if you had a serious condition and you needed to take a medication in order to not feel pain. So, I don't know, guys, maybe we don't judge people for being different from us. What a concept. So here's what's pretty sad about back then in the Middle Ages when people believed that you were a vampire and not just a sick person. Or even someone who maybe you were just a regular guy and they were just looking to blame you. The thing was that if you were accused of vampirism, you were executed. But the way that you were executed was your body was disintegrated. So, in other words, the stake and you burning on it, not enough. They ended up making sure that your entire body burned, and then they took the rest of your remains and destroyed everything. So nothing was left, not even ash. That's metal as shit, man. I just very glad I'm living in the time that I am right now. Sort of, like, mostly, but you know. So listen, even if you were burned at the stake and they like took your remains and completely destroyed them and like, you know, made it so that there was no possible way that you could come back from the dead, because that was the biggest reason why they did it. They were afraid that the dead would rise and so would come after them next, and, you know, once again, a bunch of people die out of nowhere. But the thing was that some villages were very, very crude in the way that they went out with executing people. Some places would take a person's heart right out of their chest and burn it while they were still alive. They would do other things too, like they would behead you, and just crazy times, man. Crazy times. I just went in and did a little bit more around the moon area and kind of outlined it just so around the vampire lady, I want it to be like a blue moon. So I like the color blue a lot in paintings. I don't know if you can tell. The whole execution thing of vampires, like burning them at the stake, taking their head off, taking their heart out of their chest, that actually kept up well into the 19th century. Like, yikes. But I actually learned about a vampire case that I did not know about before, and it is about Mercy Brown, who people actually say that Mercy Brown is supposed to be like the most infamous real vampire case, and probably the most famous vampire next to Count Dracula. Though, funnily enough, I'd never heard of Mercy Brown. Mercy Brown was a daughter of a farmer who lived in Rhode Island. Mercy actually died from the tuberculosis plague. And the thing was that a lot of people died back then of tuberculosis. Like, that was probably one of the most major pandemics that the world had seen. Now, of course, Mercy was killed by tuberculosis, and a lot of her family members were also killed from tuberculosis. That George's family was the first to die of tuberculosis, and then everybody else in the town started to die of tuberculosis. So, though he was first, many people started to accuse George and his family of being vampires. So basically the whole town revolted, and they made them exhume the bodies of George's family. Now they exhume everybody, and everyone looks decayed, everybody looks like they're legitimately dead, but they're also not showing any signs in their body of vampirism. So what they were looking for was bites, fangs, pale skin, like your whole body didn't really rot because you're a vampire and you're the undead, and you're gonna get out of your grave every so often to, you know, do stuff like, excuse me ma'am, I'm here to sell you Vampire magazine. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what the fuck they did back then. I mean, like, I literally don't think there was anything to do but to churn butter and stare at a wall. Anyway, so basically they exhume all of George's family members. Everybody looks pretty dead, as I'm sure you can imagine, but when they exhumed Mercy's body, Mercy showed no signs of decay. Which, I'm sure you're thinking, oh, well, that's kind of weird, but there's actually a lot of examples of bodies that have died from centuries ago that actually haven't decayed or shown any signs of decomposition. So, Mercy is not necessarily the first case of this, but of course back then, it's hysteria. They're gonna look at that and they're gonna think, oh my God, she's clearly a vampire. Now the thing is that in Rhode Island, in the winter, things are really cold. So if somebody dies in the winter and you bury them, chances are, for a few months, they're really not gonna change very much in their burial. You know, their body is dead, sure, but the decomposition is going to go very, very slowly because of the winter. So it makes sense now, but back then, when they exhumed her and they saw that, they immediately said, oh no, she's a vampire. And then they took Mercy out of her grave and did what everyone did back then. Burned her, took her heart out, cut her head off, just everything. This poor lady died of a terrible thing, and her body was destroyed for no reason. It's just so sad. When they exhumed her body and they found that she wasn't decaying at all, they immediately said, oh my gosh, she's a vampire. Well, this is so fucked up. Like, if you're eating something right now, just take it out of your mouth, because this is ghoulish. I am personally offended. But everything's about you, Zed. Okay, so now that I prepped you, basically what they decided to do was they cut out her heart and they burned it, right? And then they took the ashes, and I have no idea why they would do this. They took the ashes and fed it to her younger brother, who then, coincidentally, died a week later. Rhode Island, do you have something to say about this? Because I thought you guys were, like, pretty okay. Like, y'all are mostly just known to be, like, cool Cape Cod people. Why are you feeding hearts to babies? I have a lot of questions. Now, of course, there are actually communities out there for people who believe that they are vampires or people who claim that they are vampires. It's actually a very respectable community that I found. You can find several forums online that boast being vampire communities, and they're all around the world. So I recommend maybe looking into that one day and seeing what other people say. Now, the funny thing that I found, which gave me a real chuckle, was the fact that there are actually people out there who say that they're vampires, but they actually don't consume blood. So I'm sure you're probably thinking, well, what do you consume if you're a vampire but you don't consume blood? They call themselves energy vampires, who live off of taking the energy out of other living things. So if you've ever seen, again, What We Do in the Shadows, Colin Robinson's character is what they call an energy vampire. And the best way I can describe it, if you've never seen anyone before, it's someone who basically talks like this. Hey, Carol, I noticed there that you ate a cupcake last week, and you know, it's funny because I really like cupcakes a lot, but you know, the funny thing about cupcakes is that they are so sugary, but do you even know what kind of sugar they use? I found that the agave sugars that they have out there in the stores really not the same as stevia. And speaking of stevia, when they go in the rainforest and they collect these stevia glands, it's just, I mean, like, they bore you to tears. I bet every person can say that they know at least one energy vampire in their life. And if you're watching, hey, what's up? Okay, so before we get started in the stories, I'm just mixing up a little bit of color to start working on our vampire lady's hair. I got a little bit of blue in there, so I'm gonna see how that does with the brown. Before we do get into the stories though, I wanted to tell you all that when it came down to story selection, I just remembered all I really wanted was a selection of different types of stories. I wanted kooky stories, I wanted weird tales, I wanted like strange encounters, that type of thing. But of course there's some very interesting ones out there from what I understand. I don't know yet, like the computer's gonna read me the story and I will find out with you as well. But I do want to say that before this gets started, this is purely just to have fun. We're not making fun of anybody. We're not trying to bring anyone down. It's just so we can have a nice kooky little episode, okay? So I just wanted to put that out there before we get started. Okay, let's start getting into stories.
Hello everyone, future me here. Before I read any of the stories that I have for you today, I want to go ahead and let all of you know that after we filmed this episode, my voice completely left me. So you are about to get some very low, very sultry sounding Learn the Conjurer narration here. So I hope you enjoy it. And before we get to this first story, I'd like to point out that the Redditor was very interesting in how they chose to type this out. So I will be embellishing on this story a little bit. But as per usual, if you'd like to read the original, the link will be located in the show notes. Now to the first story. This story comes to us from Redditor Butter My Tostitos. I've encountered several vampires. You're going to say that I'm crazy, and that's okay. But I'm a psychic, and these are my experiences. I met one in Boston, in downtown, crossing at an outdoor coffee shop where they always had a big setup of outdoor seating. I sat down when I got a sense that there was a vampire, and an old one, powerful, very close to me. I heard him say in his head, "You're not that pretty. Wait, will you sleep with me?" Then I met 3 vampires in Japan. who I knew would drain me and make me dance on a pole while fatigued until I died. They told me all of this in my mind. They glowed. That's how beautiful they were. It was only later then that I met one in South Korea who said, I just read that kid's mind. He doesn't even know. Whenever we'd walk in the street. He looked handsome, but normal. I almost went home for him for sex, but I got cold feet and I said I wanted to go home. It was then that I met another vampire walking down my street who checked out the friend that I was with, but not me. I said in my head, why are you checking her out and not me? I was 17 and selfish. He replied to me, she eats vegetables. What do you eat? I said, McDonald's in my head. Ha ha ha. And then at Howl in the Moon in Boston, I met a group of them. They were beautiful, but also normal looking. Only the 3 in Japan glowed. I think they could read my mind, or some of their species can, but I think multiple species exist, and there's a lot more out there that we classify as a vampire.
Okay. Are you ready? Are you ready? Because I don't know if I am. They said that she was gonna dance on a pole until... Okay, so as you all know, I do try to find like interesting stories, and I know that they're all allegedly true. Like we really don't know if they are. I try to pick ones that I see there's a lot of updates, or I see there's a lot of comments, there's a lot of engagement. So basically, if you wanted to, you can go in and kind of like determine for yourself if this is a true story or if you think that these people are just saying things to say things. I am very much of the sound mind and body of thinking that this person is just saying things. As much as I would love to believe that I could go to Japan and find 3 vampires and they're gonna tell me to dance on a pole until I'm fatigued, I don't think that's gonna happen. I just he asked her what did she eat, and she said McDonald's. At least you're honest, right? I don't know. I'm lost for words. I really am. The way it was written, and like, if you're going to say like, oh, I encountered one and like he said this to me, and then like you stop it and then you go to a different story entirely. No, I want more details. Like, tell me more about this vampire that you found out the outside of a Dunkin' Donuts.
This story comes to us
tell me everything,
from
girl.
Redditor Nilix. The title of the story reads, Girlfriend says she met a vampire and he is in love with her. Just typing the title of this post made me feel sick. My girlfriend recently met a guy online, and they've been texting and talking on the phone for about a month now. When she first told me about it, I was of course against it. Eventually, she convinced me that it was okay and everything was fine. They were just friends. Apparently, he lives 100 or so miles away and wants to stay there. But she called me the other day and tells me while at school, this guy showed up and revealed to her that he was a vampire who was madly in love with her. What the hell? This is where I think she's really gone crazy. So apparently this guy proves to her that he's a vampire by running incredibly fast. And get this, according to her, he picks up a car and throws it? By now, I'm in absolute disbelief I'm hearing these words coming from my girlfriend's mouth. I asked her if it was a dream, and she says no. It clearly happened, and she has trouble believing it herself. I would have never considered her crazy. I'm really distraught and upset about this. I don't even know where to begin, or what to even think. If this happened to anyone else and I heard it, I would probably laugh my ass off. Just typing this makes me say, what the fuck? I'm really worried for her. She doesn't do drugs or drink. The only medication she takes is birth control. Please help.
These stories. Okay, I meant it when I said we're not making fun of anybody, okay? And I actually kind of believe this guy with what he's saying, and how he can't figure out how his girlfriend is with this dude, and he picked up a car and then he ran really fast. I'm in love. I don't know. I will tell you that I looked into that link while we were on a little bit of a break, and I could see that there were a lot of people that commented. So I would recommend looking into that because, wow, that's quite a tale. I feel like this guy could have been someone who said that he was a vampire as a part of like the community of people who call themselves vampires and label themselves vampires, but not in the same way that you and I think. But I also think that this guy probably majored in theater and probably also is a strongman and probably also knows how to run. I'm still lost. So as you can see here, I've done a lot of the detailing in the hair and I'm going into the skin now. I want her to be a little bit more pale. So I think I'm just gonna have this base going on and then I'm gonna lighten her up and we're gonna listen to the next story.
This story comes to us from Quora user, Anonymous. I have met vampires, and I may be insulted for this, or called crazy, but that is fine. Let me tell you about the basic traits of a vampire. Number 1, they drink blood. Though they can last for weeks without blood, more than 2 months will result in them becoming extremely weak and decomposing. Number 2, they have the ability to control people by looking into their eyes. This is a basic ability that also causes people to be attracted to them. Number 3, they are cold, but most people don't notice this because of the eye ability. Number 4, they do not die in the sunlight. Yes, they are sensitive, but you would be too if you had eyesight above the human capacity. Older vampires do not have this problem, since they have learned how to turn this off. Number 5, they are not immortal. This is the biggest misconception. They do live for a long time, but definitely not forever. Number 6, they can have the ability to change their features. Number 7, they can retract their fangs. This is so obvious, I don't know why people even think that you could tell a vampire by their fangs. There are half vampires in the world too, people with vampire blood in them that are not full vampires. Vampires have been known to rape humans that catch their fancy. I do not know how humans can reproduce a vampire child. It makes no sense, but it has happened before. Some people with the vampire blood in them have the largest possibility of going crazy. They are also attracted to blood. Perhaps not as a fetish, but as an irrational need to drink it. People with vampire blood also easily attract people. One thing that has been known to happen is the ability where if you stare into a half vampire's eyes for long enough, you will fall in love with them. I only know one person that can do this though. I am not a fiction book writer or anything like that. Just a person who knows the right people. Or the wrong people. If you don't fancy the darkness. Vampire is just a word. We could call them anything. I just refer to them as advanced humans.
Okay, so less of a story and more of like a checklist of what vampires are according to this person. This person seems like they know a whole lot. And it's interesting because I think that they're alluding to the fact that they know plenty of them and that all of this information that they're sharing with us is directly from people that claim to be vampires. And my thing is that first off, I thought that was all very interesting, and it actually named quite a few things that we already knew. But I kind of laughed when the poster said that he said that if you look into the eyes of a half vampire for long enough, you'll fall in love with them. And then he follows it up by saying, or she follows it up by saying, I only know one person that can do this. Bitch, who? I want to know. Is it me? Is it me? Look into my eyes and fall in love with this channel. And remember to like and subscribe. I'm dumb. Don't listen to me. I'm just somebody making a YouTube channel for funsies. Don't listen to me. As you can see here, we've gotten quite a bit farther. What I'm working on now is I'm working on the foliage at the bottom. That's a fun word. Foliage. At the bottom here, and I am going to be painting all these flowers white, and they're going to have a little bit of blue, and just because of course I like that blue moon type of silhouette, like you have even blue in her skin. I just like having it in there because I think that it definitely embodies the night. But what I really want to do is when I'm done with the flowers, I want to speckle them all with blood so that it looks like she bled all into the flowers. I just love the aesthetic of vampires. I want to be one. So I think that now we are down to our final story. While we're getting that done and over, I'm going to finish up the details of the foliage and we're going to take a listen.
Our final story comes to us from Quora user Martina Slektova. Have I ever met a real vampire in my life? I don't know. Not to my knowledge. But I might have encountered a vampire a few years ago. It could have been a demon too. I don't know. First, let me explain to you that I normally don't believe in the existence of either of them. Yet, I am convinced that science does not have the answers to everything. So, who knows if they really do exist? After all, according to scientists, less than 5% of living creatures in the world have been found so far. Just 5. So 95% are yet to be discovered. So who really knows, right? Now back to the topic. I think I might have met a vampire like 5 or more years ago, but definitely less than 10 years ago. I only remember it was the summer, and I was home alone. Our house is very old. From the beginning of the 18th century, strange things happen here from time to time, like the sound of creaking floors or doors opening and closing, but nothing actually happens. I mean, I can't see it happening, thank God, but it has happened to all of my family members. So I have proof that I'm not crazy. So it could have been a ghost as well, but I don't think it was. I have a feeling that there might be ghosts in our household, but they're very quiet and friendly. But this was not the case. It was night. I was laying on the couch and it was summer, and it was really hot outside, even in the house. A part of the house is made of 2-century-old mud bricks, so it holds the warmth really well. I had an open window and warmth was getting inside. I was sleeping, but I had to shut the TV off before. So it couldn't have been a trick of the mind or my subconsciousness working. Suddenly, my blood froze. It was as if something told me to wake up, fast, that I was in danger. I was fully conscious ASAP, but suddenly, a twisted thing entered my mind. You better not wake up. You better not open your eyes. I had the feeling that somebody was close watching me, and that they had their face just a few inches away from mine. Suddenly, a quiet voice said, Martina, wake up, wake up. I almost got a heart attack. Then I realized that the temperature in the room was bloody freezing, which was weird because when this house gets warm, it emits massive amounts of warmth, even 2 or 3 weeks later, but I was freezing instantaneously. And it wasn't because of the goosebumps. The temperature really did get lower. When I checked the thermometer later on, it read that it dropped significantly. Anyway, I opened my eyes, and for a brief moment, I had a feeling that I was looking into the eyes of a young man in his late 20s or early 30s. But I had a feeling that he really wasn't a person. He had dark eyes, dark hair, clad in black. I think he had a tie. Might have, but he definitely wore a jacket. And he was laughing. But his laughter was cruel, ice cold, merely mocking. It was so scary that my heart literally stopped and skipped a few beats. I had a feeling that I was going to faint. I closed my eyes and I thought that maybe he would disappear. In that 2 seconds, I opened them again, and he was gone, like a blur. I didn't see him leave. It was like a thing that you see in the corner of your eye, and then all of a sudden you look again and he's gone. But now, that same window was wide open. Let me tell you something. I had not opened that window in that way. I never do. I was so scared that I couldn't move. In fact, I realized that I couldn't move at all, both out of horror and certain numbness. I could not move. I could not move my limbs. I was so weak. But then I discovered in the morning I was bitten by something. This would have been nonsense, of course, but the thought literally flashed my mind when I realized that I couldn't move, and then in the morning, I had a bite mark. I didn't dare try to move or flex myself for at least 2 hours, not even a finger. I needed to go to the toilet really badly, but I risked peeing my pants, then moving my head and looking behind the corner. I was literally frightened to death. Somehow, I made myself move and told myself that I am a rational person and I shouldn't behave like this. And no, the thing, person, demon was not in the house anymore. But I promptly closed the window and locked myself in my room. Needless to say, I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, nor the following night. But luckily, that creature, whatever it was, vampire or not, never showed up again.
Wow. I mean, there's a lot that comes to my mind when that story went. I mean, first of all, the first thing that I thought when Martina was talking about hearing a voice in her head, I thought it could have been a bout of sleep paralysis. You know how when some people, when they experience sleep paralysis, they hear voices? That's what I thought it was. But then when she started describing the person she was seeing in her room, I thought, okay, well, I was like, well, it could be the Hat Man. Or, you know, it could be another type of shadow person. The way she was describing him, it sounded like it could have been a ghost. But when she was saying that she couldn't move, and then finally at the end when she was saying that she was bit, I'm inclined to believe her. I think that something happened, and it could have been a vampire, a real one. And like, I really don't know. I mean, why was he laughing at her? Was he laughing at the fact that she was like dying of heat stroke? Like, why are you laughing, dude? That probably would have been my first reaction. It would have been like, hey, sir? Is it, sir, excuse me, sir. Sir, I'm trying to sleep here. Sir, can you, I don't know what you're laughing at, sir, but can you just take it outside? No, it's fine. I'll just lay here. It's okay. Well, everyone, that's it. This is our vampire lady. Oh, I really love how she turned out, and it definitely brings back a lot of personal memories for me. But I hope that you enjoyed all of our stories, our very interesting tales, and all of our history on talking about vampires. As a reminder, Ghosties and Ghoulies, I appreciate you so much, and thank you for liking, subscribing, commenting. I so appreciate it, and the show will only get better as long as I can get your feedback. Remember, if you have encountered a vampire before, you think you might know a vampire, or you got some creepy ideas for a future episode, please email me. Email us, you mean. Email us. Right, email us at conjuringcanvases@gmail.com. I forgot to say in the very beginning, if you want to check out the entire look of my vampiric skill, go ahead and check out our Instagram at Conjuring Canvases. We just hit over 100 followers. 100 followers, yes. Please go ahead and follow us there and keep supporting the show. With that, here's our goodbyes. Remember, Ghosties and Ghoulies, never play alone, never play in a graveyard, and always say goodbye. Goodbye, Ghosties and Ghoulies. Hey, Zed, where'd you go?
Candy.